The wind carried the scent of fresh rain over the vast Texas plains, mingling with the smoldering remains of a dying fire. The sky, painted in strokes of deep purples and burnt oranges, signaled the arrival of dusk. Tauna rode his stallion steadily across the rolling hills, the rhythmic thud of hooves against dry earth steadying his pulse. He had spent the last 3 days trading with settlers, exchanging buffalo hides and tan leather for iron tools and ammunition. The weight of the satchel slung across his saddle was reassuring. It was not just supplies, but proof of his people's endurance. His heart, however, rode ahead of him back to the encampment nestled near the river, where Ayanna waited. He pictured her standing by the fire, her dark hair swaying with the wind, laughter hidden in her sharp eyes. The thought of her made his chest feel warm, a comfort he hadn't realized he needed until now. As he neared the camp, the familiar sounds of chatter and children's laughter reached his ears. The Comanche settlement, a cluster of well-worn teepees surrounded by grazing horses, was alive with the hum of a night just beginning. Fires flickered in the dimming light, their glow reflecting in the bronze faces of warriors and elders who sat in quiet conversation. Women bustled near the cooking pits, their hands swift and practiced as they prepared the evening meal. Tauna dismounted, leading his horse toward the corral. Before he could secure the reins, a soft voice called his name. He turned just as Ayanna stepped toward him, a teasing smile dancing on her lips. "You ride slower each time you return," she said, folding her arms. "One might think you enjoy being away." He let out a low chuckle, his fingers brushing against the leather satchel. "Perhaps I take my time to make the return sweeter." Ayanna rolled her eyes, though the way she closed the distance between them betrayed her amusement. "Did you bring me anything?" she asked, peering up at him. Without a word, he reached into the satchel and pulled out a delicate silver chain with a small, carved turquoise pendant. It was nothing extravagant, but he knew it would remind her of the riverbanks where they spent their summers as children. Her fingers traced the pendant, her smile softening into something more intimate. "You always remember," she murmured. Ayanna had always been the bright ember in the darkness of Tahuna's life. She carried the fire of their people in her heart, but softened it with an unwavering kindness that made her beloved by all. While he had been raised under the weight of duty, training to lead warriors, she had moved like the wind, free-spirited, curious, and untamed. It was why, despite knowing the burdens that came with his name, he had chosen her. That night, the village celebrated. The feast was rich with roasted venison, fresh berries, and the deep, earthy scent of cedar smoke. Laughter echoed through the encampment, and even the elders, who often sat in solemn observance, indulged in the merriment. Warriors exchanged tales of past battles, their voices rising with the crackling of the flames. The rhythmic beat of drums pulsed through the ground, guiding the fluid, hypnotic movements of the dancers. Tauna sat beside Ayanna, watching the firelight reflect in her eyes as she listened to the stories. At some point, she turned to him, lowering her voice so only he could hear. "Will you still be Tahuna when you are chief?" she asked, tilting her head. He frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" She studied him for a moment, then sighed. "You carry too much weight in your chest. I see it in your eyes even now. Duty, honor, they are important, but don't forget to be the man, not just the leader." Before he could respond, the old warrior, White Elk, lifted his voice. "The white men speak of peace, but their tongues are forked. The land is not enough for them. Their greed grows as the river swells after the rains." An uneasy hush fell over the gathering. Tahuna's father had spent years negotiating uneasy alliances with the settlers. Some had honored their words, others had not. Even now, trade continued, but it was a fragile arrangement. Ayanna shifted closer to Tahuna, her fingers brushing against his hand. It was a small gesture, but he understood what it meant. She had faith in him. Whatever the future held, they would face it together. The night stretched on, but as the fires dimmed, so too did the lingering joy in Tahuna's heart. He couldn't explain the unease creeping over him. the subtle warning his instincts whispered. Still, he pushed it aside and let himself believe, just for one night, that peace could last. Sleep was fleeting. Ayana's warmth beside him was a comfort, but the night carried a strange stillness that made his skin prickle. It wasn't until the distant thundering of hooves reached his ears that he bolted upright. The first gunshot shattered the silence. Screams erupted. Shadows moved frantically between the teepees. Taona grabbed his knife, heart pounding as he rushed out to see the chaos unfolding. Riders stormed the village, their faces obscured by bandanas and the smoke rising from burning tents. Gunfire cracked through the air, cutting down warriors before they could even draw their weapons. The acrid stench of blood and burning would fill his nostrils. He saw his mother fall, an outlaw's rifle still smoking from the shot that took her life. His rage swallowed his grief whole. Taona charged, knife flashing in the firelight as he cut down the nearest attacker. A gunshot exploded next to his ear, but he barely flinched. The world had narrowed to one thing: protect, avenge, survive. Then he heard her scream, "Ayana!" His blood turned to ice. He twisted, searching through the chaos until his eyes locked onto the scene that would haunt him for the rest of his days. Ayana struggled in the grip of a tall, scar-faced man, Jed Snake Eyes McAllister. His grin was wide, teeth yellowed beneath the flickering light. "Let her go!" Tahonar roared, moving toward them. Jed sneered. "Now, what kind of man would I be if I just handed over a prize like this?" Ayana's eyes met Tahonar's, her fear masked by defiance. She made a move to break free, but the sharp crack of a revolver split the night. Her body jerked. For a moment, everything slowed. She crumpled, a crimson stain blooming across her chest. Tahonar didn't feel himself move. 1 second, he was frozen, watching her fall. The next, he was lunging at Jed with an inhuman snarl. But hands grabbed him, dragging him back as the outlaw laughed and rode off with his men. The world blurred into fire and blood, but none of it mattered. Ayana was gone. He stumbled toward her, collapsing to his knees. His hands trembled as he reached for her, pressing his forehead against hers. Her skin was still warm, but the light in her eyes was fading. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Only a soft breath. Then nothing. Tahonar's vision blurred, rage and sorrow twisting into something unrecognizable. He let out a sound, something raw and guttural, something that did not belong to man or beast. It was a cry that echoed into the heavens, carrying the weight of his loss. The night ended in smoke and silence. By morning, the village was a graveyard. Bodies were gathered. The dead were honored. The living stood in quiet mourning. Tahonar's father placed a heavy hand on his shoulder, but there were no words to offer. There was only one thing left. Tahonar stood before Ayana's grave, the weight in his chest no longer just sorrow, but something sharper, something that burned. He swore vengeance, and as the wind howled across the empty plains, it carried the name of the dead and the promise of blood. The trail was cold, but the fire in Tahonar's chest burned hotter than ever. He rode alone, the wind biting against his skin as his horse cut across the empty plains. Each hoofbeat echoed the pounding of his heart, the rhythm matching the mantra in his mind. Asterisk find them, make them pay. Asterisk he had buried Ayana with his own hands, set stones over her grave, and left behind everything he had ever known. There was no turning back now. The land stretched before him, endless and indifferent, but he knew the outlaws had left their stain upon it. He only had to follow the scent of blood and whiskey. The first sign came 2 days after he left the ruins of his home. A broken whiskey bottle glinted in the dust near a dried-up creek, its jagged edges catching the sunlight. He slid from his saddle and crouched beside it, his fingers brushing against the glass. The smell was strong, biting, and familiar. He had seen men drinking from bottles like this in trading posts, their laughter thick with arrogance. His gut told him this wasn't the discarded trash of a wandering traveler. This was a marker, a careless sign left by men who never thought they'd be followed. A few feet away, the ground was disturbed, the dirt kicked up by hooves. Tracks fresh enough to give him hope. His pulse quickened as he studied them. A group of riders, moving southeast. He remounted his horse, eyes locked on the direction the tracks led. The outlaws had left a scar upon his world, and now he would carve one into theirs. The trail led him through the foothills, where the land grew jagged and unfriendly. The sky was a blanket of storm-brewing gray, the scent of rain heavy in the air. He moved like a phantom, his presence known only to the creatures of the wild. A rabbit startled from a bush, a hawk circled above, but no men appeared on the horizon. He knew he was closing in. By nightfall, he found the burned-out shell of a homestead. The stench of charred wood and death lingered. The outlaws had passed through here, whether for sport or malice. They had left behind only destruction. He dismounted, his footsteps careful as he moved through the wreckage. Inside the ruined cabin, a single figure remained, a man, barely breathing, his body riddled with wounds. Tao-na knelt beside him. The man's face was pale, streaked with dried blood, his breath ragged. He wasn't long for this world. Who did this? Tao-na's voice was low, steady. The settler's eyes flickered open, dull with pain. His lips trembled as he struggled to form words. Outlaws Snake Eyes McAllister. They took everything. Tao-na's jaw tightened. Where did they go? The man exhaled sharply, the sound closer to a death rattle than a breath. His fingers twitched, then pointed weakly to the south. Fort Broken Horn, and then he was gone. Tao-na closed the man's eyes, the weight of his vengeance growing heavier. Fort Broken Horn, a place where men with no loyalty, no honor, gathered like vultures. He had heard stories of it, a lawless hideout where outlaws ruled and the strong preyed upon the weak. If Snake Eyes and his men were there, then so was his path. He traveled south with relentless determination, pushing his horse to the limits. The land turned rougher, the signs of civilization fewer. By the third day, his supplies were running low, and hunger gnawed at his stomach. He kept moving, the pain in his body nothing compared to the storm within his soul. By dusk, he reached a trading post on the edge of the frontier. It was the kind of place where men died without anyone asking why. The wooden structure stood crooked against the landscape, its windows dark with suspicion. Outside, horses were tethered, their owners inside drinking, gambling, or planning their next crime. Tao-na adjusted his stance, his hand resting near the knife at his hip. He walked inside, the scent of sweat, whiskey, and tobacco filling his nostrils. Conversations dulled as eyes flickered toward him. A Comanche warrior, walking into a den of outlaws. He knew what they were thinking. He ignored them. He moved toward the bar, his gaze scanning the room. A group of men sat at a round table, their laughter sharp and ugly. One of them, a thick-necked brute with a missing ear, was boasting loudly. McAllister's sitting pretty at Broken Horn. Got himself a whole crew, living like damn kings. Tao-na's blood ran hot, but he forced himself to stay still. He stepped toward them, his voice calm. Where is Fort Broken Horn? The man with the missing ear sneered. Why the hell should I tell you, Redskin? Tao-na didn't give him time to regret his words. He moved fast, his hand snapping forward and grabbing the man by the throat. The table overturned, drinks spilling, chairs scraping against the wooden floor as the room erupted in chaos. The outlaw gasped, his hands clawing at Tao-na's grip. His companions moved to intervene, but Tao-na pressed the tip of his knife against the man's ribs. Tell me, he growled. The man choked, his bravado gone. South. 3 days' ride. Near the canyon. Tao-na let go, the outlaw collapsing into a fit of coughing. The room tensed, hands drifting toward holsters. He backed toward the door, his knife still drawn. Then a shot rang out. He dove to the side, as wood splintered where he had stood. The room exploded into violence. He moved like a shadow, dodging a swinging fist and driving his knife into another man's thigh. A bottle shattered against the wall beside him, and a bullet whizzed past his ear. Then someone grabbed him. A woman, tall, lean, and sharp-eyed, yanked him behind the bar, just as another shot blasted through the air. She was quick, her revolver flashing as she fired a warning shot into the ceiling. Damn fool, she muttered. You got a death wish or just bad luck? Tauna steadied his breath, glancing at her. She was dressed like a man, boots worn from long rides, a hat tilted low over her face. But her voice carried the weight of someone who had seen too much. I need to get a Fort Broken Horn, he said. She snorted. You and half the bastards in here. Lucky for you, I've got business there myself. He narrowed his eyes. Who are you? She smirked. Clara DeWitt. I've got a score to settle with McAllister. The room was still on edge, the outlaws wary but not yet making another move. Clara grabbed a bottle of whiskey, took a swig, then wiped her mouth. You want to ride with me? You best keep up. I don't slow down for dead men. Tahuna glanced back at the outlaws, their anger simmering beneath the surface. He had pushed his luck enough for one night. He turned to Clara, nodding once. Then let's ride. They slipped out the back door, the night swallowing them whole. The hunt was far from over. But now, Tahuna wasn't alone, and neither was his vengeance. The sky had turned the color of smoldering embers by the time Tahuna and Clara rode out of the trading post, the last light of day swallowed by the shadows stretching across the land. The wind howled across the plains, carrying the scent of dust and distant rain. Their horses cut through the wilderness, hooves drumming against the dry earth, the rhythm matching the urgency that burned in their chests. There was no turning back now, only the road ahead, littered with the ghosts of the past and the blood yet to be spilled. Tahuna rode in silence, his mind sharpening into something lethal, something focused. Clara kept pace beside him, adjusting the brim of her hat, her keen eyes sweeping the horizon. She was a woman accustomed to danger, her every movement careful but confident, as if she had lived through more than most men could bear. The weight of her revolver sat easy on her hip, just as his knife felt natural in his grip. They were two hunters chasing the same prey, bound by vengeance and necessity. You always as quiet? She finally asked, her voice barely rising over the wind. Tahuna didn't look at her. Words don't kill men. She huffed out a short laugh. Fair enough, but I like to know who I'm riding with before bullets start flying. He kept his gaze fixed ahead. You know what matters. I'm after McAllister. Yeah, well, so am I, she muttered. But you don't strike me as the type who just kills for revenge. You got a plan? Or you just thinking of riding in a broken horn and taking on a whole damn gang yourself? He didn't answer immediately. He had spent nights turning the thought over in his mind, weighing the reality of what lay ahead. There was no walking into Broken Horn and coming out untouched. It was a den of outlaws, men who answered to no law but the gun. But there was no hesitation in his resolve. I find him, he said. Then I kill him. Clara scoffed. Not much of a plan, but hell, I've gone into worse fights with less. They rode through the night, pressing south toward the canyons that would lead them to Fort Broken Horn. The air grew thick with moisture, the promise of a storm brewing in the distance. By the time they reached the river's edge, the wind had picked up, stirring the water into restless ripples. The river was wide, the current swift, the darkness making it impossible to see what lurked beneath. Clara pulled her horse to a stop. We're going to have to cross. Tahuna slid from his saddle, studying the water. It was treacherous, deep, and fast-moving. A wrong step could mean death, but there was no other way forward. He pulled the reins over his horse's head, gripping them firmly. I'll go first, he said. Clara didn't argue. She watched as he guided his horse into the river, the animal hesitating only for a moment before stepping into the cold water. The current pushed against them, the force threatening to drag them down, but Tahuna kept his grip firm, his movement steady. His horse swam forward, hooves kicking through the water, and slowly they made it across. Clara followed, her jaw tight as she urged her mount forward. For a moment, it looked as though she might struggle, the current pulling at her legs. Then, with a sharp command, she forced her horse onward, muscles straining against the river's pull. When she finally reached the other side, she exhaled heavily, shaking the water from her hat. Well, that was miserable, she muttered. Tahuna barely heard her. His senses had sharpened, his instincts screaming a warning. The night had fallen too silent. No crickets, no rustling brush, only the sound of the river behind them. Then he saw them, figures emerging from the darkness, rifles glinting in the moonlight. 5 men, waiting. An ambush. Tao Na moved before they could react, dropping to a crouch and reaching for his knife. The first shot cracked through the air, a bullet kicking up dirt near his boot. Clara cursed, drawing her revolver in a swift, practiced motion. "Move," she shouted. Tao Na lunged forward, closing the distance between himself and the nearest attacker before the man could take another shot. His knife struck deep, the outlaw letting out a strangled gasp as he collapsed. Another gun fired, the flash illuminating the night. Clara's pistol barked twice, and a second outlaw crumbled. She turned, dodging a swing from the butt of a rifle, and drove her elbow into her attacker's throat before finishing him with a clean shot. Tao Na caught movement from the corner of his eye, a man raising his shotgun, aiming straight at Clara. He didn't think, only reacted. His knife flew through the air, spinning end over end before sinking deep into the outlaw's chest. The man staggered back, his weapon slipping from his grasp. Then it was over. Silence fell once more, broken only by the heavy breaths of the living and the dying gasps of those who had fallen. Clara wiped blood from her cheek, glancing at Tao Na. "That your plan? Just charge into the fight and hope you make it out." He retrieved his knife, flicking the blood from the blade. "It worked," she chuckled, shaking her head. "You're a damn lunatic." They moved quickly, searching the bodies for anything useful. One of the outlaws carried a crude map, the scrawled lines marking a route through the canyons, a path leading straight to Fort Broken Horn. Clara smirked. "Looks like we found our way in." The rain started to fall as they rode through the canyons, a slow drizzle turning the dirt into slick mud. The world seemed to shrink around them, the towering rock walls pressing in from either side. It was the perfect place for an ambush, but no other men came. The ones they had killed had likely been scouts, waiting for their return. Ahead, the lights of Fort Broken Horn flickered in the distance. It was no true fort, but rather a collection of wooden buildings, ramshackle and worn, filled with outlaws who had nowhere else to go. The saloon was the largest structure, its windows glowing like the eyes of some great beast. Tao Na pulled his horse to a stop. Clara did the same. "This is it," she said. Tao Na exhaled slowly, his grip tightening around the reins. His heart beat steady, his mind clear. He had chased shadows and followed blood to this place. Now, there was only one thing left to do. He turned to Clara. "We go in separate." She raised a brow. "That's so. You watch the saloon. See who comes and goes. I'll find another way inside." She studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, Chief. Just don't get yourself killed before I get my shot at McAllister." Tao Na didn't respond. He urged his horse forward, slipping into the darkness. The night welcomed him, the hunt reaching its final hour. Vengeance was near. The night was thick with the scent of whiskey, sweat, and old blood. Fort Broken Horn loomed ahead, its wooden buildings leaning under the weight of years and sin. Inside, men drank away their spoils, their laughter sharp as broken glass, their hands never too far from their pistols. This was a place where death had no consequence, only a price. Tao Na moved through the shadows, silent as a spirit. His body was coiled tight, his senses razor-sharp. Every step was measured, every breath controlled. His heart did not pound. It beat steady, slow, patient. The time for mourning had passed. The time for vengeance had come. From the darkness, he studied the saloon, its windows glowing with flickering candlelight. The warped wooden doors barely muffled the noise from within. Drunken voices, the screech of chairs dragging across the floor, the occasional burst of raucous laughter. He spotted Clara, leaning against the hitching post, her hat tilted low, a bottle of whiskey dangling from her fingers. She played her role well, just another drifter drowning in cheap liquor. But her eyes were sharp beneath the brim of her hat. She caught his glance, gave the smallest nod, then turned back to the saloon doors. She had counted at least 15 men inside, more than he had hoped for, fewer than he had feared. Tao Na moved along the side of the building, finding the back entrance. The door was locked. He pulled his knife, pressing the tip between the latch and the frame, twisting just enough to hear the soft click. He slipped inside, swallowed by the dimly lit corridor. The air was thick with tobacco and the stale musk of unwashed bodies. Voices drifted from the main room. Gonna ride for Mexico come first light. McAllister ain't gonna like that. McAllister don't need to know. Tahuna ignored them. None of these men mattered. There was only one name that still breathed in his mind. One face carved into his memory with the cruel precision of a blade. Snake Eyes McAllister. He moved further inside, keeping to the walls. A man stumbled out of a side room, half drunk, muttering to himself. Tahuna struck quick, a hand over the mouth, a knife across the throat. The body slumped against the wall, blood pooling at his feet. He listened. No one had heard. He wiped the blade on the man's coat and moved on. The saloon doors burst open. Clara stepped inside, her boots scuffing against the wooden floor. The men turned, eyes bleary, some resting on her with drunken interest, others ignoring her entirely. She strolled to the bar, leaning against the counter. "Whiskey," she said. The bartender poured her a drink, watching her carefully. From the far end of the room, a man rose. His presence was unmistakable. Broad shoulders, a twisted grin. The deep scar that ran from his brow to his chin like a jagged canyon. McAllister. He leaned back in his chair, rolling a toothpick between his teeth. "Don't see many women in here." Clara lifted the glass to her lips, took a slow sip. "That's 'cause most of them have better sense." The men chuckled, some shifting in their seats, eager to see how the exchange would play out. McAllister's grin widened. "You lost." "No," she said, setting the glass down. "I came to kill you." The room tensed. A long pause. Then McAllister threw his head back and laughed. A deep, rolling sound that carried through the saloon. The men around him chuckled uncertainly, waiting for his cue. Then a gunshot shattered the air. McAllister's laughter died instantly. One of his men collapsed to the floor, a hole between his eyes. The room erupted. Tahuna was already moving, slipping through the chaos like a phantom. Clara dubbed behind the bar as bullets ripped through the bottles, glass shattering, liquor spilling like blood. McAllister overturned the table, grabbing his pistol. His men scrambled for cover, firing blindly. Tahuna emerged from the darkness. McAllister's eyes met his. Recognition flickered, then amusement. "Well, I'll be damned," he drawled. "Look who's crawled out of his grave." Tahuna didn't speak. There were no words left. He lunged, closing the distance between them in a blink. McAllister raised his gun, but Tahuna struck first. His knife flashed, slicing across the outlaw's arm. The gun fired, the shot going wide. McAllister staggered back, cursing. He swung the pistol like a club. Tahuna ducked, drove his shoulder into the outlaw's ribs, knocking him back. The saloon was chaos. Men were screaming, firing wildly, diving for cover. Clara shot one through the chest, then another, her hand steady, her aim deadly. McAllister recovered fast. He was bigger, stronger, but Tahuna was faster. The outlaw grinned, blood dripping from his arm. "That all you got, boy?" Tahuna didn't answer. He feinted left, then struck right, his knife biting into McAllister's side. The outlaw roared, backhanding him across the face. The impact sent Tahuna sprawling, his knife skidding across the floor. McAllister loomed over him, raising his gun. Then a shot rang out. Not from McAllister's pistol. Clara stood behind him, revolver smoking. McAllister staggered, his body twisting in disbelief. He turned to Clara, eyes wild, lips curling. She smiled. "Told you I came to kill you." Then Tahuna's knife found its mark. He drove it deep into McAllister's chest, twisting, feeling the life drain from the man who had stolen his world. McAllister choked, blood bubbling at his lips. His knees hit the floor. His eyes locked onto Tahuna's, and for the first time, there was no laughter, no sneer, only the understanding that death had come for him at last. He slumped forward. It was over. The saloon was littered with bodies. Smoke curled in the air, the last echoes of gunfire fading. The survivors had fled or lay groaning on the floor. Clara exhaled, spinning the cylinder of her revolver before holstering it. "Well, that was fun." Tahuna didn't respond. He knelt beside McAllister's body, staring at the man who had haunted his nights, who had stolen Ayana's life as if it were worth nothing. There was no satisfaction, no triumph, only silence. Clara watched him. Not what you expected? He shook his head. She sighed, adjusting her hat. Never is. The saloon crackled with fire where oil lamps had shattered. Smoke thickened. It would burn to the ground before sunrise. Tao Na stood. He looked at Clara. She nodded. They walked out together. Outside, the air was crisp, untouched by the ruin behind them. The horses waited, their breath misting in the cold night. Tao Na turned once, watching as flames began to consume Fort Broken Horn. The pass was ash now. He mounted his horse. Clara glanced at him. Where to? He didn't know. The road stretched ahead, endless and empty. The world had taken much from him, but had left him one thing, a chance to ride forward. And so he did. The year was 1885, and the frontier was a land of both opportunity and death. For Julie Carlson, today was the day death rode into town on the back of her fiancé's black stallion. She stood quietly behind the oak counter of her father's general store, gripping its edge, her knuckles bone-white, her breath shallow. The rough-cut planks creaked beneath her worn leather boots, matching the anxious beat of her heart. Outside, Bitter Creek bustled with cautious energy. Miners bartered at trading posts. Women shuffled quickly from store to store, eyes downcast, and gamblers argued loudly in front of the Lucky Star Saloon. Yet, in the store, the air hung thick with dread. Julie's eyes darted nervously toward the approaching figure outside the window, the silhouette unmistakable, Jesse Slade, her fiancé and one of the territory's most feared outlaws. Jesse threw open the door, the bell jangling harshly, slicing through the silence. His boots clumped across the wooden floorboards, spurs clinking rhythmically, each step carrying danger closer. His piercing blue eyes, once charming, now held the steel of betrayal. "Julie," Jesse growled softly, his voice a storm wrapped in velvet. "I reckon you got some explaining to do." She swallowed hard, feeling trapped in a shadow. Jesse tossed a crumpled, tear-stained letter onto the counter. Her heart plunged when she recognized her handwriting. The desperate plea she'd sent to her father in Cheyenne, begging for help, confessing Jesse's cruelty and her fears. "I trusted you," Jesse hissed, leaning closer, breath hot with whiskey. "Now look what you've done." Fear surged inside Julie, but anger rose faster. She met his gaze, finding a shred of strength she didn't know she possessed. "I beg you to change, Jesse. You chose this life, not me." He slammed his fist violently onto the counter, splintering the wood. Julie flinched but held her ground. "I chose you, and now you've gone and betrayed me," he seethed. His voice softened menacingly. No one betrays Jesse Slade. Julie's heart hammered wildly. Jesse had always been possessive, but she convinced herself that beneath his rough exterior, love lingered. Now, she saw only darkness. Before she could react, Jesse lunged across the counter, grabbing her wrist, his grip painfully tight. Instinctively, Julie reached beneath the counter, fingers brushing cold steel. Her father's old Colt revolver felt heavy and reassuring. Trembling, she aimed it straight at Jesse's chest. He froze, eyes darkening dangerously. "You wouldn't." Her voice shook, but determination strengthened it. "Let me go, Jesse." For an eternal moment, silence crackled between them. Then Jesse smiled, a cold, cruel twist of his lips. He released her wrist slowly, stepping back with exaggerated care. "All right then, you want freedom? Go ahead. But remember this. You run, and I'll hunt you down, clear across the frontier if I have to." Heart thundering, Julie didn't lower the revolver, even as Jesse stepped backward out of the store. When the door slammed shut, her hands fell limp, the gun clattering against the counter. Tears stung her eyes. She knew Jesse's threat was no bluff. The night descended swiftly, plunging Bitter Creek into darkness. Julie paced the store's back room, frantic, the walls closing in. She couldn't stay, yet fleeing would mean risking Jesse's wrath. Memories flooded her mind. First meeting Jesse at the spring dance, his charming smile, sweet words masking darker truths. How blind she'd been, how naive, but regret wouldn't save her. Decision crystallized inside her heart. She had to escape before dawn. Julie gathered essentials hastily, matches, blankets, dried food, and stuffed them into a worn saddlebag. She reached for her cloak, wrapping its worn wool tightly around her shoulders, protection from both cold and dread. Yet her breath caught when voices drifted from the alley behind the store, low and sinister. Jesse and his gang were already watching, waiting for her to move. She hesitated briefly, heart racing. There had to be another way out. Recalling the cellar's hidden hatch leading to the rear stable, she moved swiftly, lantern in hand, shadows dancing on cellar walls, her every movement urgent. The hatch opened with a creak, revealing moonlight cutting through the darkness. Julie pushed through, emerging behind the stables unseen. Nearby, Jesse's men muttered impatiently, tobacco smoke drifting lazily, their backs turned. Her chance was narrow but clear. Adrenaline fueling each step, she slipped into the stable, heart jolting at each creak of the old barn door. She saddled her mare, hands steady despite fear, determination eclipsing panic. Yet as she guided the horse toward freedom, Jesse's sharp voice sliced through the quiet. "She's gone. Find her." Fear surged anew. Julie kicked her mare into a gallop, hooves pounding through dirt streets, lanterns flaring awake in windows she passed. Jesse's furious shouts echoed, horses thundering in pursuit. She pushed forward, the wind cold against her face, the open plains stretching darkly ahead. Desperation sharpened her focus, senses heightened, each sound magnified. Then, gunshots cracked through the night air, bullets whistling past. Her pulse surged wildly, terror squeezing her chest. "Faster," she pleaded softly, leaning low against her mare's neck. "Please." Suddenly, the lights of Bitter Creek vanished, replaced by the silent immensity of open wilderness. Jesse's gang faded back, unwilling yet to risk the uncertain terrain in darkness. Julie allowed a brief moment of relief, knowing it was temporary. Jesse was relentless. Morning would see his pursuit renewed. She rode deeper into the darkness, breath ragged, thoughts racing. Her only hope lay far beyond, across territory controlled by the Navajo, where Jesse's hatred couldn't easily follow. Yet such a choice carried its own risks. Still, Julie preferred uncertainty to Jesse's known cruelty. Hours passed, dawn painting faint streaks across a sky heavy with clouds. Exhausted, she slowed her horse near a riverbank edged by towering cottonwoods. She dismounted, trembling legs nearly collapsing beneath her. She bent to the cool water, washing dirt and dried tears from her face. She stared at her reflection, tired eyes framed by tangled hair, yet within them shone defiant strength. "I won't let him break me," she whispered fiercely, voice quivering yet firm. Movement rustled behind her. She whirled, drawing her gun instinctively, heart racing. Nothing, just wind whispering through leaves, taunting her nerves. Still, fear lingered, refusing release. But unseen eyes watched Julie closely, their intentions hidden in shadows. Jesse wasn't the only danger lurking. This land was vast, filled with unseen perils. Julie stood, breath calming slowly. Her resolve deepened as daylight broke fully. She knew this chase had only begun, a pursuit born of blood promises and deadly obsession. Yet she refused surrender, understanding that survival would demand every ounce of courage she possessed. Her eyes scanned the horizon, fierce and resolute. Jesse Slade had chosen to hunt her, but Julie Carlson would not become prey. With determined strength, she climbed back onto her saddle, prepared to face whatever came next. Morning painted the sky with gold and crimson, streaks of dawn creeping over the wilderness, as Julie guided her exhausted mare deeper into Navajo territory. She had traveled without rest through the bitter chill of night, driven forward by fear. Now, her strength faltered, replaced by bone-deep weariness that dulled her senses. The wind sighed through juniper trees, whispering of solitude and danger. Suddenly, her mare stumbled sharply, neighing weakly before crumpling to the dusty ground. Julie tumbled painfully into dirt and dry grass, her breath knocked from her lungs. She gasped, tasting copper and grit. She crawled slowly toward her mare, anguish tightening her throat. The animal lay, breathing heavily, sides heaving, unable to rise. Despair flooded Julie's heart. Without the horse, she was trapped, exposed. Footsteps stirred behind her, soft but deliberate, alerting every instinct to danger. Julie spun around, hand darting toward the revolver at her hip, but stopped mid-motion, frozen in astonishment. Before her stood a tall, Navajo warrior, dark eyes steady, unreadable. His posture exuded quiet authority, shoulders broad beneath buckskin garments that blended seamlessly into the landscape. His long black hair shimmered faintly, woven intricately with beads and feathers, symbols Julie could not understand but felt conveyed strength. A worn bow rested casually in his grip, but tension simmered in his muscles. He was wary, ready for danger. Julie's pulse raced. The stories settlers told of the Navajo were darkened by prejudice and fear. Yet as she looked into his calm eyes, something unexpected stirred within her. Hope mingled curiously with caution. Silence stretched between them, taut and uncertain, until the warrior finally spoke, his voice smooth yet edged with careful restraint. "You've entered Navajo land without permission," he said calmly. Yet Julie sensed steel beneath his tone. "Who pursues you?" His clear English surprised her, momentarily stealing her words. She steadied herself, standing tall despite shaking legs. "My fiancé, Jesse Slade. An outlaw. He'll kill me if he finds me." The warrior studied her carefully, expression betraying nothing. Then, his gaze shifted toward the fallen mare. Quietly, he stepped forward, bending beside the animal, fingers gently tracing its trembling flank. Julie watched warily, confused yet compelled by his tenderness toward the suffering creature. "She will not last," he murmured solemnly. "Her spirit is broken." Julie's eyes stung fiercely, emotions barely restrained. I don't know what to do," she admitted softly, voice cracking with vulnerability. The warrior rose slowly, turning to face her directly. "My name is Tahoma," he offered, something softer now in his voice, carefully assessing her again. "You must leave this place. Your pursuers will not respect Navajo borders." "I have nowhere else to go," Julie whispered desperately. "I only seek safety." Tahoma hesitated briefly, an unreadable conflict crossing his expression. His own people were wary of white settlers, their presence too often linked to violence and betrayal. Yet, something in Julie's eyes, raw with sincerity and fear, stirred an instinct within him. "Then follow closely. Do exactly as I say." Relief flooded Julie, swiftly tempered by fresh anxiety. She left the mare, heart heavy with sorrow, and followed Tahoma silently along a winding path concealed by twisted brush and boulders. He moved with fluid grace, swift yet noiseless, occasionally glancing back with a calculating stare, testing her determination. Julie pressed on stubbornly, refusing to reveal weakness despite deep exhaustion and blistered feet. They traveled in tense silence, the only sound their breathing and the occasional snapping twig beneath Julie's clumsy steps. She marveled silently at Tahoma's stealth and patience, qualities born of harsh land and survival. He fascinated her, his silence speaking volumes, each gesture a testament of deep knowledge and hidden sadness. As the sun reached midday, they paused beside a narrow creek sheltered by cottonwoods. Tahoma signaled Julie to rest, crouching quietly, eyes scanning their surroundings keenly. Julie drank deeply from the icy stream, cool water reviving some strength. Still wary, she watched him carefully, unsure of his intentions yet grateful for his presence. Tahoma broke their silence softly. "Why does Jesse Slade hunt you?" Julie hesitated, the weight of painful truth pressing heavy. "Because I dared to defy him, to seek freedom." She met Tahoma's eyes, emboldened by his calm empathy. I was naive, fooled by charm masking violence. His dark gaze softened slightly, understanding passing silently between them. Men like him know only possession. They do not easily release what they believe is theirs. Then how do I survive him? Julie whispered, desperation coloring her voice. You must become stronger than his hate. Tahoma replied, simply, quietly firm, eyes meeting hers directly. Fear feeds men like Jesse Slade. Courage denies them power. Before Julie could respond, distant hoofbeats echoed faintly through trees, swiftly drawing closer, urgent shouts carried on the wind. Fear surged within her anew, panic threatening control, but Tahoma placed a steadying hand gently on her shoulder, quiet strength flowing from him to her. Trust me, he urged softly yet powerfully, gaze unwavering. Without waiting for her response, Tahoma rose swiftly, guiding Julie quickly upstream into deeper wilderness, movements purposeful yet careful. Shadows stretched long, sunlight fractured by the shifting branches, suspense hanging heavy with every hurried step. Finally, hidden beneath rocky cliffs, Tahoma halted abruptly, signaling silence. Jesse's distant voice, enraged and relentless, echoed harshly through the canyon. You can't hide forever, Julie. I will find you. Jesse roared, voice echoing ominously. Fear clutched Julie's chest, pulse racing painfully, but Tahoma's calm presence steadied her. He spoke softly, firmly meeting her frightened gaze. He hunts with anger, and anger blinds. You must hunt with patience and courage. Julie breathed deeply, absorbing his words, courage blossoming within her heart. Tahoma's quiet dignity, his strength forged through hardship, inspired something fierce inside her. She nodded solemnly, committing herself fully to trust him. With quiet determination, Julie rose again, strength rekindled. The path ahead remained uncertain, danger close behind, yet now she moved with purpose, feeling something powerful awaken within herself, resolve born from desperation, guided by the unwavering warrior beside her. Ahead lay darkness and doubt, but also hope. Jesse Slade would not easily surrender his prey, but neither would Julie Carlson. They crouched silently among rocks cloaked by twilight's shadows, the rhythmic drumbeat of distant hoofbeats growing steadily louder. Julie's pulse quickened as dread tightened her chest, each heartbeat marking Jesse's relentless approach. Beside her, Tahoma crouched motionless, eyes narrowed into the dusk. His breathing was slow, controlled, a stark contrast to her rapid, nervous gasps. Calm your heart, Tahoma whispered, his voice steady and reassuring. Fear makes prey easy to catch. She drew a breath, nodding faintly. Julie admired his unshakable composure, the confidence he wore like armor. She tried to steady her own pulse, closing her eyes momentarily to silence the storm inside. When she reopened them, resolve burned fiercely within her gaze. They're coming closer, Julie said, voice barely audible. She listened to the distant sound of Jesse's men, a low murmur, harsh laughter mingling with snapping branches and rustling leaves. Panic clawed again at her chest, but Tahoma placed a firm hand gently on her shoulder, silently reinforcing his presence. Patience, he murmured softly. Minutes crawled by. Then, abruptly, Tahoma moved, pulling Julie into thicker brush as Jesse's gang appeared through the trees. Their shapes were dark, ominous against the fading sunlight. Jesse himself led, eyes sharp with rage, his jaw clenched tightly beneath stubble that masked former charm. Julie's heart pounded painfully, memories flooding back, moments once tender, twisted now into something monstrous. One man strayed close, oblivious to their hiding spot. Julie's pulse thundered loudly in her ears, each heartbeat feeling like a betrayal. Tahoma silently raised his knife, prepared to strike if necessary. Julie placed a trembling hand on his arm, begging silently for mercy, not for the outlaw, but for her own conscience. Tahoma hesitated, lowering his weapon reluctantly, dark eyes reading her plea clearly. The man eventually wandered off, sparing them confrontation for now. Night descended fully, cloaking the wilderness in darkness. Jesse and his men faded into distant murmurs, seemingly deceived into believing they'd lost their prey. Julie exhaled shakily, relief mingling with exhaustion. "We cannot rest yet," Tahoma warned quietly. "They'll circle back, angrier." Julie nodded grimly. "Why help me? You barely know me." Tahoma's eyes softened with quiet reflection. "You carry strength you do not see. I to know cruelty. My family was taken from me by men like Jesse. Helping you is fighting the same darkness." His honesty struck Julie deeply, drawing a profound respect from her wounded heart. Quietly, she answered, "I won't be helpless anymore. Teach me to fight." Surprise flickered into Tahoma's gaze, followed quickly by approval. "Then you must begin now." He swiftly handed her a small, sharp blade. It felt foreign, yet empowering, resting in her palm. Carefully, he showed her techniques, motions quick yet precise. Her movements awkward at first, soon steadied with determination, guided by Tahoma's patient instruction. Within moments, confidence took root. "You learn quickly," Tahoma remarked gently. "Good. Your enemy knows no mercy." A sudden distant shout broke their concentration. Jesse had returned, his gang spreading out, relentless, torches casting ominous flickers across darkening woods. Julie's throat tightened, eyes meeting Tahoma's. Unspoken understanding passed between them. Flight was their only choice now. Together they ran, weaving expertly through shadows, the forest growing denser. Sounds of pursuit echoed hauntingly behind them, Jesse's angry voice louder, harsh with menace. Suddenly, Tahoma halted sharply, gripping Julie's arm. Ahead loomed a steep cliff, a rocky canyon stretching wide and unforgiving below. Julie's breath caught, panic surging again, vision spinning from exhaustion. Tahoma assessed their predicament swiftly, urgency marking his expression. "We climb," he declared resolutely. He began scaling jagged rocks without hesitation. Julie faltered briefly, stomach churning with fear, but his confidence ignited courage. Handholds rough beneath fingertips, she climbed, muscles trembling painfully. Beneath them, Jesse's gang drew near, voices echoing ominously. Julie slipped abruptly, a sharp cry escaping. Tahoma lunged swiftly, strong fingers seizing her wrist, pulling her securely upward, eyes fierce yet compassionate. "Hold on," he urged firmly, eyes steadying her panic. "You are stronger than you believe." Heart racing, Julie nodded, pressing upward with renewed resolve. Moments stretched endlessly, nerves taut, palms scraped raw. Finally, breathless and aching, they reached the canyon's crest. A network error occurred. "Please check your connection and try again. If this issue persists, please contact us through our help center at help.openai.com. Sunset ignited the horizon, bathing Bitter Creek in gold and crimson hues, as though the heavens anticipated violence. Julie and Tahoma crouched silently on the rocky ridge overlooking town, watching shadows lengthen like warnings across dusty streets. Both had journeyed far, weathering hardship, grief, and loss, forged together through struggle into a powerful alliance. "They're waiting," Julie whispered, voice steady despite the anxious beating of her heart. She surveyed the small town below, dread tightening her throat. Jesse Slade stood defiantly near the Lucky Star Saloon, confident, a revolver glinting in his hand, as he barked orders at his restless men. He was thinner, wilder now. Rage had stripped away his charm, leaving only cruel determination behind. Tahoma's dark eyes narrowed, quietly assessing the enemy's position. "He thinks fear makes him powerful," he murmured softly, his voice calm but resolute. "But fear cannot sustain power forever." Julie's heart pounded painfully, anxiety sharpening her senses. "What if he kills us both?" Tahoma's gaze locked onto hers, gentle yet unyielding. He controls your fear. Do not give him that power again. His words resonated deeply, stirring strength Julie had discovered during their flight. She straightened, shoulders back, no longer the frightened girl Jessie hunted. Her eyes hardened, determination etched in each line of her face. "I'm ready," she declared softly, conviction firm. Tahoma nodded solemnly, pride flickering briefly in his expression. Together, they descended toward town, movements careful yet bold, every step bringing them closer to confrontation. As they approached, Bitter Creek's citizens scattered hurriedly, shutters closing, doors slamming tight. The town knew violence intimately, yet still recoiled from Jessie's unchecked fury. Julie's heart pounded fiercely, tension knotting her stomach. Beside her, Tahoma moved quietly, his calm presence steadying her nerves. Jessie stepped forward, his eyes bright with hatred and mocking amusement. He raised the revolver casually, aiming carelessly toward them, arrogance dripping from his posture. "You came back, Julie," he sneered coldly. "I knew you would. I always knew." "I came back to end this," Julie stated boldly, voice shaking slightly yet firm. She moved forward, posture defiant. "Let me go, Jessie. This ends now." He chuckled bitterly, eyes narrowing dangerously. "It ends when I say it does. You belong to me. I belong to no one." Julie shot back sharply, voice echoing fiercely through empty streets. "Not anymore." Jesse's face twisted in fury, his grip tightening around the revolver. "I see he's made you bold." He spat contemptuously, jerking his head toward Tahoma. "But courage won't protect you. It'll only make your suffering longer." Tahoma stepped forward slowly, eyes locked firmly onto Jesse's. His voice was quiet, powerful. "Let her go. Walk away. There is no honor in hunting the innocent." Jesse's jaw tightened, knuckles whitening around cold steel. "Honor means nothing out here," he snarled. "All that matters is strength, and she's mine." Tahoma's expression hardened, eyes sharpening with quiet intensity. "Then you have chosen your path." Silence blanketed the street. The world seemed to hold its breath, waiting for violence to explode. Jesse raised his gun swiftly, aiming directly at Tahoma's chest. Julie's breath caught sharply, panic flaring, but Tahoma remained motionless, poised, ready. "Last chance," Jesse spat venomously, eyes flicking toward Julie with ruthless malice. "Come willingly or watch him die." Julie's pulse raced wildly, but her voice was steady, fearless. "I'll never go with you again." Jesse's expression twisted into something monstrous. In a flash, his gun rose, trigger tightening. Time slowed unbearably, each heartbeat stretching, suspense coiling tightly. Tahoma moved swiftly, an arrow already notched, bowstring snapping sharply before Jesse's revolver cracked loudly, sending birds scattering into the fiery sky. Jesse staggered back, arrow lodged deep in his shoulder, his shot going wild. He stumbled, fury blazing anew, eyes murderous as he aimed once more. Tahoma drew his knife swiftly, closing distance in mere heartbeats. Jesse fired again, the bullet slicing past, barely missing. They collided violently, struggling fiercely, each strike vicious, desperate. Julie watched helplessly, pulse deafening. She hesitated briefly, torn between terror and courage, yet compelled by an instinctive need to fight, not just for herself, but for Tahoma. Spotting a fallen rifle nearby, Julie lunged forward, snatching it swiftly. She raised the weapon with trembling hands, pointing shakily toward Jesse. "Stop!" she shouted sharply, desperation straining her voice. The men froze, locked in struggle, Jesse's face contorted with pain, rage, and surprise. Julie steadied her aim, gaze unwavering. "It's finished, Jesse. Let end." His glare burned hatred through her. "You're weak," Jesse growled bitterly. "You won't shoot. You underestimate me," Julie whispered fiercely, determination burning brightly within her. Her voice rose clearly now, strong and unwavering. "I won't kill you. Not because I'm weak, but because I won't become you." Tahoma, sensing the shift, released Jesse, stepping back warily. Jesse staggered, weapon still drawn, breath rasping unevenly, gaze shifting frantically from Julie to Tahoma. Blood seeped from his shoulder, dripping heavily onto the dusty street. "You think mercy will save you?" Jesse snarled, voice shaking with suppressed fury. "You're wrong." Julie shook her head slowly, sorrow now replacing anger. "Mercy isn't weakness, Jesse. It's strength you never understood." Jesse stared at her, rage battling disbelief. Wounded pride etched deeply into his features. Realization settled bitterly over him. She was beyond his reach now, forever changed. Slowly, his gun lowered, trembling slightly, bitter resignation flooding his expression. "You'll regret this," he growled weakly, stepping backward unsteadily. "I swear it." Tahoma stepped protectively in front of Julie, gaze fixed coldly upon Jesse, voice low yet powerful. "Leave now and never return. If you pursue her again, your blood will stain this earth." Jesse hesitated, conflict warring visibly within, before he spat contemptuously at the dirt. Then, staggering, he turned toward the gathering darkness, defeated but not destroyed, his wounded pride a fresh scar. Only when Jesse disappeared completely into the shadows did Julie finally lower the gun, breathing heavily, tears pooling silently in her eyes. Tahoma turned gently toward her, concern softening his gaze. "You showed courage," he said quietly, approval warming his voice. Julie shook her head slightly, relief mingling with lingering fear. "He'll never stop. I know him." Tahoma placed a gentle hand reassuringly upon her shoulder, quiet strength flowing through the touch. "Then we will be ready." She met his gaze, gratitude and deeper emotions flickering quietly between them. The warmth of trust replaced fear, forging an unspoken bond stronger than words. Yet, even as calm settled over Bitter Creek, uncertainty lingered on the horizon. Jesse was wounded, not defeated. Julie knew her battle wasn't truly finished, but now she stood with strength and purpose, no longer prey, prepared to face whatever storm might come. The sun dipped slowly below distant hills, plunging Bitter Creek into twilight. Julie's eyes rose to Tahoma's, trust and resilience etched deeply into her expression. Their fight was far from over, but Julie had found herself stronger, wiser, and ready to face the inevitable darkness ahead.